Happy Pride, everyone! This asexual fool is here to answer your questions. So without further ado, let's begin this episode of Q&Play. First question comes from sparklefulpaladin. Have you ever played as an LGBTQ plus character? If so, can you tell us a little bit about the character and your experience playing them? I play a lot of LGBTQ plus characters. In fact, I'm pretty confident in saying that most of the characters I play are queer in some way. We've got the boiling isles going on over here in my D&D game. There's just a lot of queer NPCs, and most of my player characters are also asexual or aro-ace, just like me. In terms of favorites, we got Marin and Amory, a sapphic couple that my players were very invested in getting back together after they were separated. The party were working alongside Marin to find her way back to her girlfriend, and they were dedicated to making sure that Marin made it back to Amory A-okay. And just last session, they actually succeeded, which was very sweet to see. These two are based off the aesthetic of Luce and Amity from the Owl House, because I just really like the aesthetic of those two characters. And Jane, the artist who drew these two, did such a good job with their color palette. I really like these characters. I think their relationship is cute, and they act as really good supporting cast for my player characters. Another favorite of mine and my audience is Kalia Solfero. She's a lesbian character from Shadow over Carconos and my home game, and she's great. Her sexual orientation does not really pop up much in the campaign in any way at all, and honestly, I don't think that's a bad thing at all. Not every queer character has to have their queerness be a major part of their character. Like, obviously, if Kalia talks about who she has a crush on, she's going to say a woman because she's gay, but besides that, her orientation didn't really pop up much in the campaign, and I think that that's okay. When you create a queer character, it is a part of the character. It can be a major part of their story, like for example, Marin and Amory, their relationship is a big part of their narrative. However, that's not necessary. Kalia, during Shadow of Carconos, is single. Of course, her gayness is still relevant. When discussing her backstory, she mentions an ex-girlfriend, so therefore, yeah, it factors in. But unlike Marin and Amory, it's not the center focus. Both approaches are perfectly valid as long as you know how to handle them. Now finally, if you've been watching the 10th Tomb, new episode coming out this Wednesday, you would know Yumi, the main quest giver of that campaign. She is an asexual character, not aromantic. I want to create a character that, unlike me, is just asexual. I am asexual and aromantic, and for a long time I conflated being aro-ace with being asexual because I wasn't really familiar with all the terminology, but I now know those are two different things, so I wanted to create Yumi as a sort of way to explore just an asexual character rather than an aro-ace character like Caroline, for example, who is an aro-ace changeling who also appears in the 10th Tomb. But yeah, Yumi as a character, I think as an asexual character, is really interesting because her whole thing is seeking out connection with other people. She's a telepath who yearns to trust others. A lot of people create asexual characters as loners, which, I mean, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm a pretty isolated guy myself, but asexual people are just like any other person. They desire connection with others. It may not be a romantic connection or a sexual connection, but asexual and aromantic people do feel those emotions. And I wanted to create Yumi as a way to explore that. She's an asexual person who wants connection, who desperately wants connection. It's a big part of her motivation. Besides them, there are just countless more queer characters that I've played as and created. And you know what? I think that's pretty cool. Question from Mightymajin. Do you watch any other D&D shows other than Critical Role? If so, which ones? So yes, I do watch other D&D shows besides Critical Role. I actually started out watching Dice Camera Action, which turned out to be something in the end. Very unfortunate. Unfortunately, Dice Camera Action is just not remembered very fondly just due to just a lot of stuff that happened with the cast. I'm not even gonna get into it. It's like a whole narrative with plot twists and stuff. But yeah, you can look it up if you want to. It's out there. But that's actually how I got into D&D in general, was Dice Camera Action, Pro Jared, and the Game Grumps. Pro Jared on Dice Camera Action did a game with the Game Grumps, and if you don't know who the Game Grumps are, then I'm just gonna feel sad, so let's just move on. But yeah, Pro Jared did a game with those guys, and through that I got introduced to Dice Camera Action, and that's how I got into D&D in general and started to want to play games. That was in 2015. Years later, two members of Dice Camera Action, Anna Prosser Robbins and Nate Wants to Battle, joined up with Mika Burton to do a new D&D show called Knights of Evening Star, and I really enjoyed that for a while. I did get burnt out on the podcast because it just doesn't have the sound design that I desire from a D&D podcast. If you watch my D&D podcast, you'll get a sense of what I want out of a show. I want music, I want sound effects, I want something to get me immersed. If it's just 5 people in a call with lots of awkward silence, I just can't handle it. In fact, it bothered me so much at one point, I literally started pulling up World of Warcraft ambient music and sound effects just so that I could have that with Knights of Eden Star in the background, and I would like shift it around as I watch. But frankly, I like watching D&D podcasts while I'm working or while I'm in the car, and obviously that's just not practical to do, so I actually kind of got burnt out on the show, but I might come back to it just because I think Mark Humes did a great job DMing. Another podcast that influenced a big part of my visual style when it comes to RPG horror stories is Realms Apart. If you see the physical set for Realms Apart, you'll notice that it bears some similarities to the sets I made for RPG horror stories. That was a direct inspiration. I also stopped listening to Realms Apart after a while. I just didn't feel like I was invested in the characters or the story as much as in Critical Role. But again, you can always come back to these kind of things. There's nothing wrong with taking a break from a podcast, especially since it's so long. I try to keep my own D&D podcast under 10 hours in terms of length, maybe 12, especially now, just because from an editing standpoint, it's easier on me, and also because I know that watching a show that's 120 hours long, it's just crazy for some people. No hate against long shows like Dice Camera Action, like Critical Role, but, I wanted to do something different. I also listen to my own D&D podcast sometimes because, I honestly like the stuff I make. Question from Mutant-Cake. Happy Pride, Crispy. I have an idea for a character for my next Pathfinder game who is, well, edgy as hell, fletching rogue, shadow dancer who uses shadow magic to enhance their stealth and combat abilities. I really like this character concept and really want to play them, but I'm also very anxious about them being labeled as an edgelord right away and becoming a laughingstock without the party giving them a chance. What advice would you give for role-playing such a character and presenting them to the party to avoid that? It is all about the first impression. Masao Takeda in Shadow over Karakonos is a very edgy and serious character, and his first impression was beating up some dudes, which I approved alongside Crow's Perch, the player. I was the dungeon master. I set up a situation where he could look cool and badass, but not overpowered. He beat up like 2 thugs. Okay, I think it's reasonable that he would be able to do that at level 3. It gave Jacob an opportunity to act cool and edgy, and it gave me an opportunity to introduce this character in a way where the audience and the other players would take him seriously. In the 10th Tomb, I also introduced Cleo, an assassin played by Fall Cosplay, who is also pretty edgy. She got introduced by being threatened by 2 assassins, and Fall got an opportunity to play her as cautious. She's not stupid or cocky, but at the same time, she's not scared out of her boots of 2 people who seem pretty scary. Of course, Fall Cosplay, the real life person, was a little worried, but her character wasn't. It gave an opportunity for her to look cool without getting into a fight, having these people who are ostensibly pretty scary completely unfaze her. Work with your dungeon master to introduce this character in a way that doesn't make them look like a fool. Don't just be brooding in the back of the tavern with some silly name like Dark Edge Shadow Gale or something like that. Figure out a way for that first impression to be genuinely intimidating. Raw Bat and Bats the Batman is a good example. Atom Smasher's first scene in Cyberpunk Edge Runners is a good example. Look at stuff like that to see what you should do with an edgier character. Question from Destroyer Inazuma 96. What's your most memorable one-shot? My most memorable one-shot. I feel like this is targeted because my one-shots suck. I am so bad with pacing sessions, it's unbelievable. I want to make a full video about this, but I'll give the TLDR here. I'm DMing for 2 groups. 10th Tomb, which is with the YouTubers I play with, and then my home game, The House of Devils, which is just with my friends. The 2 of them are so vastly different, and the big thing that changes is pace. The 10th Tomb group roleplay so much more, and it's so much harder for me to pace the sessions and to get things done. It's a very different type of pressure I feel than when I'm DMing for my home game. With my home game, they roleplay a lot less, and it's up to me as the dungeon master to create things for them to get invested in, because without me doing that, they're gonna lack that sort of connection. I need to make characters that they're gonna be interested in, because they're not really like role-playing amongst themselves. They prefer role-playing with me as an NPC. That means I've got to perform a lot more, but I have a lot less pressure around time control, because they will very naturally move through scenes if they can tell I want to move on. But with the 10th Tomb, they roleplay a lot more and want to do more extensive scenes, which I love, because that means I can sit back and just watch them do their thing. But at the same time, like, okay, I've got combat to get to. Am I going to have room? What I'm trying to say is, with all these pacing issues that I have, I run horrible one-shots. I can never get it done in one session. It's always terrible. And if I do get it done in one session, it's always a rush. I've literally never run a good one-shot. I always feel like they have major, major flaws. And it's not like they're a horror story, because that would also make them memorable. No, they're just flawed. They're just mildly silly, you know? So it's just like the worst kind of bad. It's forgettable kind of bad, which is why I don't run a lot of one-shots, and I prefer to run short campaigns, like the 10th Tomb, for example. Question from TallGuy752. Hey, I've been listening to your videos for a while now and just wanted to ask where the H in the word weird comes from. It's right there, you idiot. Can't you see it? God, you might need glasses, okay? I mean, seriously, I'm worried about you. Question from Anarchy1765. Who do you think is the biggest, baddest BBEG in Dungeons & Dragons? Everyone seems to think it's Vecna, but I'm curious what your opinion is. I think it's become Vecna because of Critical Role and Stranger Things, which I don't think is a bad thing. Vecna is a pretty intimidating bad guy. But I subscribe to Matt Colville's theory. Vecna is the ultimate bad guy wizard, Tiamat is the ultimate bad guy dragon, Orcus is the ultimate bad guy demon, etc. I mean, Orcus is debatable, you might switch between him and the Demogorgon, but look, the point is that, yeah, the nature of how D&D frames their villains just means that there's never going to be one major BBEG for the whole thing. Like, a lot of people would say the BBEG of the MCU, for example, is Thanos. But if you're a Marvel fan, you would know that there's a lot of big bad evil guys throughout the Marvel universe that surpass Thanos. Thanos is a good villain, especially in the films, in my opinion. But, you know, he doesn't necessarily need to be the be-all, end-all of all of Marvel's villains for all time. There's always going to be a new bad guy that people fixate on. Right now, I think it's Vecna, which, again, I don't think it's a bad thing. I really like Vecna's new design. I'm not a huge fan of the new Eve of Ruin module they've got going on. I think it's one of the more disappointing releases, but I think Vecna looks great. It took a little bit for me to warm up to the design, but especially in Dead by Daylight, I think he looks awesome. So really, I don't think this is bad at all. I think Vecna being the biggest, baddest BBEG right now is cool. I mean, I don't know if you recall, but it wasn't long ago where Tiamat was the biggest, baddest, end-all, be-all bad guy for Dungeons & Dragons. We released D&D 5e with the module that I despise, Horde of the Dragon Queen, and the big bad evil guy of that whole arc was Tiamat, and she was a major, major focus. I'm sure when we get the 5e revision, we'll have a new villain to super fixate over. Maybe there'll be a better Tarask. Who knows? Question from Viva. Favorite Nat 20 moment. If you guys have seen my actual plays, you'll know that I have a rule called confirming. If you roll a Nat 20, roll again. If you get another Nat 20, something extra miraculous happens. Though, of course, if you don't get another Nat 20, then it's fine. You still have a Nat 20, it's awesome. But the same applies to Nat 1s. Roll a Nat 1, roll again. If you get another Nat 1 twice in a row, something awful and terrible happens. But if you get anything other than another Nat 1, you still have a Nat 1. That sucks. This is just an extra chance for something extra crazy to happen on top of a normal Nat 20 or a normal Nat 1. And my favorite Nat 20 moment is a confirmed Nat 20 during my second D&D campaign. Our rogue died after a doomed boss fight against an undead dragon that was raised inside of a tomb. The dragon has a whole epic backstory I'm not going to get into right now. It was a really awesome moment, but it did result in the rogue's death. I do Revivify rituals. If you cast Revivify, you need to pass a skill challenge in order to revive the person. And the players were rolling like garbage. And there was a lot of concern that this would be the end for our rogue until the pirate captain of the ship rolled his persuasion check and got a Nat 20. And we're all like, confirm it, confirm it, confirm it. And then he did. And oh my god, that was amazing. Like, I really thought the rogue would be dead in the water forevermore, but no, the pirate captain, a man who a lot of the time is made fun of for not deserving the captain's seat, proved why he deserved to have that chair. He brought his crewmate back, even in the face of an undead dragon trying to tear them all apart. It was amazing. Favorite Nat 20 moment, bar none. Final question from Cravingthecrazey. You're pretty open about being asexual on your channel. When did you realize you were ace? I realized I was ace a long time ago, back when I was in dear old senior year of high school. So yeah, a while ago. But I only came out to a few people at the time. Nowadays, pretty much everyone in my life knows I'm asexual. There aren't many people who are close to me who don't know. It's not something I bring up at every opportunity, but obviously if someone asks if I have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, then I bring it up because dumb. Honestly, my realization that I was asexual and aromantic came pretty dang quickly. I didn't flirt with the idea of being any other orientation for very long once I realized I wasn't into women. And by the way, if you're unaware of the story, the reason I realized I wasn't into women, I had a little flirtation with a woman. And she was great. She was hilarious and pretty and nice and friendly. And I wasn't into her. And I really was confused as to why. It's not like we just met, by the way. We had been friends for a long time. We really liked each other. So what the heck is the problem? And that's when I started realizing, like, oh my god, I think I'm not into women. There was a moment where we were sitting together in the car, and I was trying to do something romantic, and I just didn't feel any butterflies. I didn't feel nervous. It's almost like I just didn't care. And I was like, okay, there's something up. This is wrong. And that's when I figured it out. Which is funny, because that's also when she figured out that she's gay. We were both each other's last ditches. By the way, we're still friends to this day. The point of that story is that it's gonna be awkward sometimes, especially when you're young. Like, I was figuring all this out about myself when I was pretty darn young. So I was way more awkward just naturally by being a teenager, and combine that with romance being involved, and yeah, it's weird. It is, not gonna lie. And it's not always going to be flawless. I think there needs to be more media made about how messy coming out can be. How figuring this out about yourself is not always like one Google search and a little PowerPoint presentation to your parents. It is a lot. Maybe you'll have to have many conversations with the same person. Maybe you'll get it wrong and you won't realize the truth about yourself for many years. I'm not trying to do this to scare anyone. It is worthwhile because I feel more comfortable in my own skin because I've realized this about myself. But it wasn't something that I just figured out in one day. It took some awkwardness. Me and that woman didn't speak for a long time because, I mean, the whole situation was strange for both of us. But of course, we were both in it together. And when we got back together as friends, we both realized how much that whole situation meant for both of us. It's always worth it to figure things out about yourself every time. I hope you guys have a happy Pride Month. I've got some art posts up for Pride, and I'm going to do a photo shoot in the future for Pride, so look out for that. It's going to be fun. But in any case, if you guys enjoyed this video, you might enjoy the 10th Tomb, our D&D podcast. I'll stop shouting it out next Wednesday, but until then, I'm going to keep on doing it. It's linked in the cards at the end of the video. But before you go, if you enjoyed this one, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of our content, then hit subscribe so you can get notified of it right as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own questions or thoughts, go down in the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment, so mote it be, to reference the game I'm playing in the background and to let me know you made it to the end of the video. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.